Hello, my friends. I think everyone remembers Lavrov's statement that they see no point in signing documents with Zelensky since he's supposedly an illegitimate president, and Trump made a comment about this.
This past weekend, Sergei Lavrov was saying that Putin will not sign a peace deal with Zelensky because Russia views him as illegitimate. I'm just wondering if the Russians had been relaying this to your team, if they view Zelensky, as the leader worth signing a peace deal with, if they will go to the
Doesn't matter what they say. Steve can answer, but I can answer too. Doesn't matter what they say. Everybody's posturing. It's all bullshit. Okay, everybody's posturing. Steve, yeah.
As we can see, Trump doesn't take these statements seriously, and this directly shows that he doesn't really understand the Russians and their plans. That's why Trump cannot end this war. At the same time, he once again decided to threaten Russia with sanctions. When asked by a journalist whether Putin is again at risk of sanctions, the American president said he is considering such an option. We have economic sanctions. I am talking about the economy because we don't want a world war. He also once again stated that Russia is 15 times bigger, so it would have been better to surrender right away rather than wage war against Russia.
Very tricky, very horrible. But with war, you never know. Things change. People go into war, think they're going to win the war, and then they get their asses kicked, and they lose their country, and they lose millions of lives. Nobody goes into a war thinking they're going to lose. They go in. I'm sure that Ukraine thought they were going to win. It's going to be, we're going to win. You're going to beat somebody that's 15 times your size. Biden shouldn't have let that happen.
And instead of blaming Russia for the invasion, he said that Zelensky is also guilty of this war. So it's clear that Trump continues to defend Russia and especially Putin. Zelensky isn't completely innocent either. Right, it takes two to tango. But despite the fact that the wars continue, Witkoff stated that Trump should be awarded the Nobel Prize and that by the end of the year, they want the war to be over.
Ukraine, Iran, Israel, Hamas. We're having meetings all this week on all three of those conflicts, and we hope to settle them before the end of this year. Your team is nothing short of incredible. And there's only one thing I wish for, that Nobel Committee finally gets its act together and realizes that you are the single finest candidate since the Nobel Peace, this Nobel.
Overall, empty talks continue while the war in Ukraine goes on. So let's move on to the situation at the front. And in recent days, good news has begun to appear here because the Ukrainian forces have started carrying out counterattacks. Today, we begin with the Dobropillia direction. For the second day in a row, the Russians have been unable to advance in the area of Kucherev Yar and Novoshakhove. It seems that the Ukrainian forces managed to weaken them significantly, and for now, Russia doesn't have enough strength for new offensive actions. Fighting continues only near Nikhanorivka, but there have been no changes in the past 24 hours. At the same time, reports say that the Russians are heavily shelling all the mines in the Dobropillia district. Throughout the day, the Russians continue to deliberately shell energy infrastructure in the Donetsk region, says Mikhailo Volinets. All the mines in the Dobropillia community have been under attack all day long. At the Dobropilska coal processing plant, a fire was extinguished. At the same time, the Russians damaged the main ventilation building of the Almazna mine. In the Pokrovsk direction, the Ukrainian forces managed to advance quite significantly near Novoekonomichne, pushing past the village. For now, the Russians are saying nothing about the situation. Earlier, they claimed that Ukrainian forces were breaking through toward Myrne near Malinivka, but today they remain silent, pretending nothing happened. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces have pushed the Russians back considerably from Myrnohrad, and the situation has improved. However, this advance is likely just the beginning, since it seems to be aimed at cutting off the entire Dobropillia direction. So we'll have to wait and see how events develop further, as the general's staff's plans remain unknown. At the same time, the Russians are trying to break through in the area of Rodinske and Myrolubivka, storming Suchий Yar, Chunishine, and Udachne, while also advancing near Kotlene and Zvirove. The Russians have achieved small gains as well. Yesterday, they moved forward in the areas of Chunishine and Udachne, so for now, the fighting here remains very intense. In the Novopavlivka direction, the Russians are breaking through near Muravka and Gorikhove, storming Dachne and Zeleny High, and advancing near Voskresenka. Yesterday, the Russians also moved forward in the area of Filia, so they have achieved some success here. However, Ukrainian forces managed to push the Russians back from the border with the Dnipropetrovsk region. In fact, Ukraine has been able to turn the situation around in this area. Near Velika Novosilka, yesterday, the general staff denied reports about the capture of the village of Zaporizhzhia, so the front line in this area had shifted, but later it was confirmed that the village of Vorone fell under Russian control. Their breakthrough here was 4 kilometers and 200 meters deep. Today, they are storming Komushovacha. This means activity here is not decreasing and the front is shifting quite dynamically. In the Gulay-Pole direction, the Russians are storming Malinivka and shelling Zaleznichne, but so far they have been unable to advance and there have been no changes over the past 24 hours. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, the Russians are pushing through near the village of Plavny and also storming Pavlivka. The number of shelling attacks here remains high, but so far the Ukrainian side hasn't reported any new Russian breakthroughs. In the Kherson direction, the Russians continue trying to advance on the islands closer to Kherson, but they haven't achieved any success, and the situation has remained unchanged over the past 24 hours. Shelling continues at the same intensity as before. Now let's move on to the Kostiantynivka direction. Here, the Russians are not reducing the activity either. They are trying to advance in the area of Chasiv Yar, storming Stupochki, Pretechene, and Oleksandro Shultine. They are pushing in the area of Deliivka, Sherbinivka, and Rusin Yar. Over the past day, there have been no changes, but the situation remains extremely difficult. In the Siversk direction, the Russians are pushing toward Yampil, storming Serebryanka, advancing in the area of Gregorivka, and attacking Fedorivka. For now, there are no changes, but the situation here is very difficult, with the number of shelling attacks extremely high, and the Russians sparing no resources. In the Lyman direction, the Russians are breaking through near the village of Kolodezi, advancing toward the village of Drobosheva in the area of Shandrigolove, and also fighting for Novomikhailivka, while advancing on Druzhelyubivka. However, for now, there are no changes on the front line here. So, in the Borova direction, the Russians are storming Boguslavka and attempting a breakthrough near Luzova. Activity here is relatively low, and the situation has remained unchanged over the past day. In the Kupiansk direction, the situation is very difficult. The Russians are storming Holubivka and breaking through toward Petropavlivka. Fighting is also ongoing in Kolesnikivka, and after a breakthrough near the village of Myrne, the Russians released a video showing that they're already attempting to advance toward Blagodativka. So far, no official confirmation has been made, so we are waiting. However, it's clear that the situation is worsening and the Russians are trying to gradually encircle Kupiansk because they're slowly succeeding. Reports indicate that they have begun sending more reserves to complete their operation. In the Dvorichna area, the Russians are storming Kutkivka and breaking through toward Kolodezne. But over the past day, there have been no changes. The Ukrainian forces are managing to repel all attacks. In the Veliki Burluk direction, the Russians are storming Ambarne, but so far they haven't managed to capture the village, and the Ukrainian forces are successfully repelling all attacks. In the Kharkiv direction, the Russians are again attacking Gliboke, but as before, they have no success. Activity here is not very high, so there are no changes. It also reported that as a result of a drone strike by the FPV on Kozacha Lopan, one person was injured. In Vovchansk, fighting continues, although the situation remains unchanged. The Russians cannot advance the front line even a meter, so this area has been relatively stable for some time. In the Sumy direction, the Russians continue attacks near Oleksiivka, Novomykolaivka, and Yunakivka, but they have had no success, and the situation remains unchanged over the past day. Ukrainian soldiers report that the Russians are conducting a strategic regrouping along the front. The Russians are currently carrying out a strategic regrouping. Many units that were involved in northern battles are being moved to Donetsk and Zaporizhia. Some units are being redeployed to the Kupiansk and Borova directions. Our soldiers are trying to improve positions wherever possible. In Sumy, of course, we have successes, and there may be more because the Russians have withdrawn nearly 70% of their reserves and 20% of main forces. Globally, the Russians are preparing for an autumn campaign, which could begin in a few weeks, while maintaining the current pace of offensive actions. Clearly, the main focus of the Russians will be the Pokrovsk Myrnohrad agglomeration, Siversk, Lyman, Kupiansk, Kostantinivka, and Orikhiv with Gulay-Pole. Following their old scheme, they will concentrate forces where they can advance, but the primary direction will be Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad. I think the battles for these cities are not far off, unfortunately. Meanwhile, Trump joyfully claims that all costs for the war in Ukraine have fallen on NATO allies, and the US is just making money.
And the difference is they didn't pay the 2 and they paid the 5. So, and as you know, we are selling a tremendous amount of equipment to NATO. We're not spending any money, we're making money, but I don't want to talk about making. I want to talk about we're no longer involved with funding Ukraine, but we are involved with trying to stop the war or the killing in Ukraine. So we're selling missiles and military equipment, millions and millions, and ultimately billions of dollars to the NATO people, where I'm very friendly and we have a great relationship. But that was an amazing trip. So they're funding the entire war. We're not funding anything. I think it's an important point to make because a lot of people don't understand that.
At the same time, Merc promised sanctions if Putin doesn't meet with Zelensky.
Last week, President Zelensky made it clear in Washington that he is ready to meet with Putin in the coming days. Now it's Moscow's turn. If the Russian president is serious about ending the killings, he will accept the proposal. If the Russian side does not take this step, greater pressure will be needed. In that case, we are working on further sanctions in the European Union. The American president also suggested introducing additional punitive measures. This is not excluded.
Friends, be sure to share your thoughts on this in the comments. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.